I would bring it up in the meeting. I didn't necessarily want to go. No. I can't even imagine. Oh my God, I really understand.
All right, that sounds good. Yeah.
I'm like,
I
know, but
How you doing?
call the meeting to order. We'll begin with the pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, and thank you all for coming to be with us tonight. And I'd like a motion to enter into an open session of the Budget Committee. Mr. Nordalillo, and a second, Mr. Vondell. All in favor? Thank you very much. I'd like to remind you that Mrs. Nordalillo and Mr. Vondell are co-chairs of the Budget Committee. And I will turn it over to Mr. Porter.
And I think I will go right to Julie Scriven, our Director of IT. Tonight is the night where we are looking at our IT equipment infrastructure spending proposals for the upcoming year with an update on the Smart Schools Bond Act. And so I think, Julie, without further ado, we'll get started here.
Okay, well, welcome to Technology Night. My department has kind of a history of being a little long-winded, so I am going to do my very, very best tonight, even with 22 slides to not drone on forever. I am also, because we are kind of techno nerds in my department, I'm going to try really hard not to get buried down in the weeds, but kind of keep the discussion at a high level, 20,000 foot kind of level on some of the technology purchases. But if you have questions and techie, very techno nerdy questions, please feel free to ask them. I'm going to kind of break it up into 3 parts so people don't fall asleep. And I'll give you some opportunities while things are fresh in your mind to ask questions. And I also have my network administrator, Keith Sprague, here. So if you have any nitty gritty technical networking questions, he is here to answer them. You know what, I have a slide later introducing people, but I am also going to take an opportunity to introduce Amanda Jewell, who is doing the live streaming tonight. So thank you very, very much for taking care of that. And do we have any viewers?
We have 9.
Woohoo! So this has been a banner year actually for live streaming. I will have to say we're super excited because while we may not get a ton of live stream viewers while we're streaming, we have a ton of people who are coming back and watching it after the fact. And I think, Ben, was it 150 something, 150?
Yeah, it was one second. Give you the most up-to-date numbers here. It was 152 last week and 139 the week before, 146 last week, 139 the week before.
All right, it's starting to become a little bit of a competition now, so we're going to hope tonight we get a lot of viewers. All right, so without any further ado, every budget meeting we start with the mission statement, and this is super critical for my budget as well. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but there is one part of this mission statement that we really take to heart in my department, and that's the very last line, which says, in order to provide high quality, relevant, equitable education for all. So we're going to talk a little bit later about the Chromebook 1-to-1 program, and that is where we really strive to kind of level the playing field. So I'm going to start with just kind of an high overview of my department and who's in it. We've already met Keith and Amanda. I also have Senior Network and Systems Technician Tom Mead, who's not here this evening, Network and Systems Technician like Amanda, Brian Van Alstyne, and Ryan Moore, who's one of our tech assistants who works kind of amongst all of our buildings. We did have and are greatly missing a shared secretary, which we shared with the Information Services Department, and we'll kind of talk about that on another night. We also have 8 building level computer aides. 2 of them right now we are trying to currently fill. So if anybody knows anybody interested in a computer aide position, please have them see me. That pool has been very small, so we're still posting. Just some brief stats to give you an idea of how big our network is here. In years past, I just put kind of statistics from the current year, but we thought it was really important to show how much we've grown in the past couple years. And I'm not even sure that this gives a completely accurate picture because this is only showing the user, like the end user devices, PCs, Chromebooks, and those sort of things. It doesn't even show the number of phones we've added, the projectors, all the other devices. And when you add all those up, it's well over 10,000 devices that our department now supports. I also want to give a little shout out to Keith here. He always gives me some of my network statistics. Our network, especially our Wi-Fi, has grown tremendously, as you can imagine, with the Chromebook 1-to-1 program. In an average day, in an average week this year, we have over 12,000 devices on our Wi-Fi. And that's just the Wi-Fi, not even the wire network. So that's an increase of 26% from last year, and I would assume with what we're planning for next year, it will only go up. So other accomplishments this year. Our big push this year was to increase our 1-to-1 program. Last year, if you remember, we had Chromebooks in 7th and 8th grade. This year, we expanded that to cover 5th through 12th. We did that in a very interesting way. We did not have the money to, of course, go out and buy Chromebooks for all of those students. And it's really important for us to be equitable. So what we did is we actually took some of the Chromebooks we already owned, and we very, very carefully this summer reorganized and redistributed so that we could actually give the same model to each grade level. So Our 11th graders, while they don't have the same model that a 5th grader has, every 11th grader has the same exact model, so everybody feels equal. All of our 6th through 12th graders now take them home as well as use them at school. Most of our 5th graders, there are some who leave them in school, some schools that prefer to have them leave them in school, but almost all of the 5th graders are also taking them home. So what do we plan for the future? Well, next year, what we would really like to do is cover grades 3 through 12 with our one-to-one program. Now, covering 3 through 12 does not necessarily mean they're all taking those home. We're thinking that the 3rd and 4th graders will probably leave them in their classroom in a cart. But what we found is that if you give somebody kind of ownership over their Chromebook, they take much better care of it. So the plan is, even for the 3rd and 4th graders, to put their name on that Chromebook, because we found that if their name is on that Chromebook, they don't sit and pick the keys off when they're bored. They know they're going to have to use that Chromebook the next day, and they take really good care of it. In fact, our 7th and 8th graders last year, when they turned their Chromebooks in for the summer, it was amazing. They were immaculate. We had very, very little damage. It was shockingly good. Really, really good. We were kind of a little concerned, but they did a beautiful job. So other things we're going to cover next year. We would like to cover basically a third of the number of students in every building with Chromebooks, and we're going to kind of the organization of this is different in every building. So most buildings in grade 2 will have 1 cart per building. So they'll share it amongst their classes, and a whole class can use the Chromebooks at a time. Now in grades K through 1, most of the schools would like a more station-centered approach, where in every classroom we have maybe 5 to 12 Chromebooks that a small group of students can go use at a time. Some schools would prefer actually to have the same model as 2nd grade and have them in 1 cart, and we have some flexibility to do that as long as we can cover basically a third of the students in each class with our Chromebooks. So we will have some schools that will probably have a cart, and we have some unique carts that have smaller modules that hold 5 to 6 Chromebooks at a time, so you can stack them, you can reorganize them, and we can be very flexible in how we distribute them. So how are we going to do that for next year? So next year's plan, all the students who currently have a Chromebook, that Chromebook will roll up with them to the next grade. So our current 5th graders will be taking their current Chromebook up with them to 6th grade. So the new incoming 5th graders will all get new ones. The 4th and 3rd graders will get Chromebooks in carts in their classrooms, and you're going to see there's a line at the bottom here to cover the Chromebook carts that we may or may not need, and I'll address that in a minute, to buy for those. We're also including a number of Chromebooks in case we have some oopsies, which do happen, unfortunately. So we've got about 150 for repairs, and then we usually include about 150 to, this year I'm upping it a little bit, 164 for new students. We have a lot of new students that come in at both the 9th grade level and down in the middle school. The Chromebook parts, you're going to notice I did put in for the 3rd and 4th grade classes, but I am really hoping that we won't need to spend that. Last year, we actually got a very generous donation from Shen. They had gone to one-to-one and didn't need some of their carts, so we were able to repurpose some of their carts. It was great. We have some existing carts that we may or may not be able to use. There's some changes to the designs of Chromebooks coming up this coming year that may preclude us from using them, so I'm putting money in there in case we need it, but I'm hoping that we don't need to. Next, we have things on the replacement cycle, and our replacement cycle is actually thankfully shrinking, and most of that is actually because of the Chromebook one-to-one program. So where we had carts of MacBooks in libraries and labs before, now that we have Chromebook one-to-one rollouts, we don't really need those labs full of them in most cases, but there are a few cases where we still do. So at the high school, we have a few classes where either the curriculum dictates or some of the software that they need for the class dictates that they have either a PC or a Mac, and I'll kind of list those off so you'll know what they are. So in the business wing, we have a keyboarding lab, and they use They learn Microsoft Office products. They also have a special tool that allows the teachers to actually grade their keyboarding, and that only works on a PC, so we're going to replace theirs. Those are about 5 years old. We do have 2 CAD labs that are due for replacement. The CAD labs are one of the few labs that we actually do in a 4-year replacement cycle, mostly because the CAD software requires some higher resources than normal, and so we tend to actually need to replace them sooner. The other thing that I just did want to note here is that these 3 labs, we're actually buying new monitors for them. We don't normally do that. In fact, we haven't done that in about 8 to 10 years in these labs. They still have the old 4x3, 19-inch, very small monitors, but it is time to actually replace them. So this year, the expense for those labs is a little higher than it's been in the past because we had to include a monitor in there. We have 2 physics classrooms that are due for replacements, and those also need to be PCs because they actually have physical testing equipment that needs to hook into the PC and needs to run on specific apps that are on the PC. And the library is one of those places where we're not actually replacing their full cart. They used to have a full cart of 31, and we're actually only going to replace some of it. And we're going to give them a few extra Chromebooks in case you're a high school student and you actually forgot yours. You could go to the library if you needed to work on something and borrow a Chromebook. We also like to include a couple of the PCs in case kids from the business class or other classes want to go down in the library and work when they're not in their class. So we are still going to replace 6 of them, but not the full 31. We have an art cart at the high school, which is an interesting case. As you know, we have started to switch over from MacBooks to PCs, mostly because of the cost, and this is no exception. The MacBook Pros that we would need to run the art software, with their warranty, were going to cost almost $2,000. So we talked about it, and we decided that we are going to try to convert. This is the first part of converting art over. We're going to try and convert them to PC, a 2-in-1. And one of the benefits of this 2-in-1 is it actually has a drawing tablet built in where they'll be able to draw directly on their screen, whereas with a MacBook, you actually have to have this other device that you draw on. So there's some advantages and certainly a cost advantage to switching over to PCs. Next, we have some replacement iPads. The lab of the library was actually our first library to get iPads in it, so theirs are a lot older than the other schools, so we're going to replace 10 of them there. And the next one is an interesting one. So when we first started buying Chromebooks, and when all schools actually started buying them, we all kind of thought Chromebooks were like a 2-year device. We thought, you know what, I think we're going to get 2 years out of them. And then 2 years went by, and we were like, maybe we'll get 3 years out of this. This is good, better than we thought. And then the end of the 3rd year came, and we were like, they're still not telling us that we have to get rid of them. They still seem to be working, so I think we can get 4 years. At 4 years, the device is starting to get pretty beat up, and we're not looking so good. And we do still have some 4-year ones, but at 5 years, Google actually, it's a hard stop. At 5 years now, they have said you will no longer, it's end of life, they'll no longer support the operating system, and so at 5 years, we know they're dead. The ones that were up for replacement this year were about 4 to 4.5 years old. Most of those, I think, are going to really be replaced with the one-to-one program. So as you'll notice, I did not put 1,236 of them here, but I did put 300 in because we will still have some of those that are in those K-1 carts that exist out there now that we aren't necessarily, we're filling with our existing equipment that we may need to have replacements for. And we do have some extras that we include in our special ed classrooms, and I'd like to make sure that if we have replacements there, that we do take care of those. The next set on the replacement list are MacBooks being replaced by PC laptops. This year, it's mostly the junior high and the senior high teachers. Last year, it was mostly elementary teachers. We still have a few elementary ones that are going to be coming in. We have some new and spare laptops, just in case we have breakage. And in this line for 106, we have 80 PC laptops that are due to be replaced for teachers next year. And we have another 26 for the PE department. The PE department has been trying for the past 2 years to use either iPads or Chromebooks, and we've just kind of determined that it's not really working, and they do really actually need a full PC. You'll see on the next screen we're they're asking for some TVs that they can actually broadcast directly wirelessly from their laptop. So this kind of fits in with that. So they've added 26 for the 26 PE teachers. The last line in here are some projector replacements. So if you guys have been here or other presentations, you'll know we have about 500 projectors that we have in our replacement cycle. We try and keep them on about a 5-year cycle. Some of the projectors, we're really lucky, they go 7 years. Some of the projector models we've bought have only gone 2 years. So on average, it's about 100 a year. With the construction project at the junior high, I think we're gonna have enough rooms replaced through the construction project that we can just budget for 80 for this year in our replacements. This is just kind of normal break fix. The projector kind of dies. The other thing to note on this is in a lot of the cases now, instead of a projector, if no touch is needed, we actually will put in a large screen monitor instead, because in the long run, it tends to be more cost effective. If you think about a big flat screen TV, it's gonna last at least 10 years, maybe more, maybe 15. If we buy a projector, it's gonna be dead in about 5 years, and in that 5 years, we'll replace the bulb multiple times. And unlike a light bulb, those bulbs are extremely expensive. They run between $50 and $175 per bulb. So the other nice thing with a panel like this one is a lot of our buildings have HVAC systems installed in the ceilings, and it actually shakes the ceiling. And when you have a projector mounted to the shaky ceiling, the image on the board actually is shaking and vibrating. And when you have a touch panel, calibrating it to a monitor that's slightly shaky is really troublesome. So in those locations, we like, when we can, to replace them if there's a problem with a screen more like this one. Next, we have departmental additions. So I met with most of the department heads. These are things that each department has asked for the following year. I'll start with the art department. They have asked for 2 very small 3D printers in a couple of their buildings. If any of you, I don't know if any of you printed in 3D, but when you print out in 3D, instead of like a paper printout that comes out in about 30 seconds, a little small object on a 3D printer can take 8 hours to print. So if you can imagine you're a teacher and you want to print your class project out, it can take up to a month to print it on the one printer they have. So they're asking to have 2 more, so they'll have 3 total and be able to more efficiently print out those class projects. And if other schools, like a different elementary school, would like to do a project, they can either send it there or borrow those extra printers. So we didn't get them for all, but enough that we can kind of distribute them when we need for projects. Next, we have some iPad stands for some really cool stop motion animation that they're doing at the junior high with their iPads. They actually take sequential pictures, and if you don't have a stand to put that iPad in to hold it perfectly still, it doesn't look so good. So they've asked for stands for those. We have a CAD room in the high school that is actually extremely large and extremely full, and they've asked to have 2 presentation surfaces so that at any one time, half of the class can be looking this way and half of the class can be looking that way, so they can get a little closer to the board. In A206, it's just one of our business labs. They do marketing there, mostly marketing classes, and they would like a color printer for obvious reasons for marketing materials, so we're going to try and get them that. Next, we have iPads for an Apple Music called Quaver that all of our elementary schools are using. We could not afford in the first year to buy them sets of 30 to cover all of the students, so they kind of had to share, and we said we would try and come back and finish out the carts of 30 in the following year. So this is enough iPads so that each of the elementaries will have a cart of 30 in their classrooms. I'm not sure how many of you have been to a presentation in the high school auditorium, but we have kind of a unique setup for a school in the front there. We do not have a mounted projector, so anytime we need to give a presentation, we have a very lovely screen that automatically rolls down, but then we have this cart with lots of wires and things dangling and tripping hazards and kind of a fire hazard up front. And every year we say, oh yeah, we're going to budget for that, and every year we kind of forget about it. So this year we remembered. So I do have money in to replace that, to actually install that. And at the junior high, we actually do have a projector mounted way up in the ceiling, but it is about 10 years old. and the resolution is very poor, and the cables that come to it kind of go to the wrong spots. So we would like to replace that with a new one. The next, I'm gonna group them together. We have some TVs that are needed both for the gyms, where I'll give you an example. If you've got kids that are learning a new line dance and you want to show them a YouTube video, you can wheel the TV out, show the class what they're supposed to be doing, and then before the next class that's playing basketball comes in, you can wheel it out of the way so that nobody damages it. It works a lot better right now. They've been using one of those old-fashioned screens that you have the tripod and you pull it out and set it up, and it has not been working well for them. And we also have a TV for a classroom in the library that Ms. Fields is helping to get us a virtual reality lab from the local forces.
For free.
For free, yes, we're super excited. It's going to be really cool. We have some printers that are going to be for student use from their Chromebooks in the elementary schools. We also, both of the manufacturers that came in to demo the new security system for the junior high and really for all of our buildings, have recommended that we get some large monitors for the SRO's office. If you can imagine, if you've got a screen of tiny thumbnails of all of the security cameras in the district, they're kind of tiny to see, so they suggested that we have some larger monitors. So those are included here. For those of you who've been in any of the high school classrooms, we have a large collection of 32-inch old school TVs. Kind of like we all used to have, and probably your grandmother still has. They are still in our high school classrooms, and it's what we are using to broadcast the announcements in the morning. And they are all starting to die, and we need to replace them. And part of that is actually coming up with some hardware that will help our high school studio actually be able to live stream their announcements in the morning, so that we can get rid of those large TVs. So if anybody knows anybody that needs a large donation of some very big 32-inch TVs, we hopefully will have a bunch to give away. Lastly, we have a couple of desktops for studio work at the junior high in their new studio, and a couple of kiosks for library searches. Now, kind of a big one, which I really was hoping that I was not going to have to present, and I'm hoping we will not have to include in this budget, but we are holding a meeting later this week with the construction crew to talk about what is going to be covered in the FF&E for the new construction project. But I really wanted to present some of the dollar figures here, so that if we end up having to charge some of this fund some of this from the regular budget, that it wasn't a surprise to people. People had seen the numbers, but I am going to continue to say I am hopeful that we will, by the end of the week, be able to take this back out of the budget. But I did want people to see it. So, what this is, in the junior high, we have some new classrooms coming online, both at the end of this year and throughout the year next year. This is a touchscreen for only the new spaces. So only the new classrooms, not the classrooms that are in the renovated areas but not being renovated. So for instance, in the C and B wing hallways, this is only for the rooms that are fully renovated, not for the rooms across the hall that aren't renovated. Originally we had planned on having 2 screens in each of the spaces, but we're now thinking that we'll put 1 in, and if we have the money later, we'll come back. We have wired already for the second one, so it's all set if we want to come back and put it in. And we're hoping that the second monitor, if we order one, will just not be a touch-enabled one. It will be more of just a TV where people can collaborate and connect to wirelessly from their Chromebook or from a laptop. So there are 75 rooms at the junior high. There are 4 at Bout Hills that are new and 5 at Southgate that are new. They'll all get touchscreens. Then, as part of the new fire alarm system and the new PA system, we are going to need to install phones in, it turns out, every classroom in the district. However, this budget year, we will not have to cover every classroom. We will only be covering the new classrooms coming online. So that is the whole junior high and the new classrooms at Southgate and Bout Hills. So that comes to about 122 of those phones. I do want people to understand and kind of fully disclose that the end figure for about 500 phones, which at some point we are going to need to purchase to finish out the PA system, is going to be about $150,000 for those phones. And in truth, when we got the budgetary quote, our vendor told us they were gonna charge us $90,000 to install them as well. The good news is, we actually have someone, Tommy, who is actually trained in our phone system and can install them, so I think that we will not have to spend any of the $90,000. It's at best a tiny portion of that. So there will be some savings there, but I do want people to know that there's probably down the pipe coming that full $150,000. So, kind of jumped ahead on this, this is actually saying the same thing. And the other good thing about the phones is in the areas that aren't covered by the new construction, we'll actually cover the wiring for those phones in-house. We have an incredible maintenance department that runs network wires for us all the time, and the guys on my team work in conjunction with them and are able to install this all in-house. So I'm gonna, after this slide, I'm gonna kind of give everybody a little break. Everybody can stretch a little bit, we can ask some questions. But I did kind of want to summarize so far, because this is really the biggest bulk of our spending is in instructional tech. So the first one, just to kind of recap, we've got $418,000 for the Chromebook 1-to-1, $551,000 for the replacement cycle, I'm kind of blacking out, sorry, $91,000 for the additions, and this is the number here that I'm hoping we will be taking out. It's a little shy of $300,000, which gives us $1.3 million. So we're hoping to get this back into the $1 million category. And then I really want to emphasize an important thing down here. So we purchased a lot of our hardware this year through BOCES. And one of the really nice things about purchasing it through BOCES is next year we will receive aid back on that equipment. It's about 46%, kind of a ballpark of the number. And so that aid so far in what we've bought from BOCES should be $321,000. So that actually is going to offset a lot of that $1 million that we're planning to purchase. So if we take out that construction piece, we're looking at somewhere around $700,000 in instructional tech for next year. I will also kind of admit that there are some disadvantages to buying through BOCES, and I have to be kind of upfront about that. It takes time. It takes a lot of time, and it takes time in a time period when we don't have a lot of time. So what we found is that during the summer when you order through BOCES, the ordering process takes a lot longer. Even if you order ahead, they still don't place your order for equipment until about 3 weeks into July, which means it meant last year that most of our equipment did not show up until the end of August. And when you have a one-to-one program that's starting the start of school, getting that equipment ready and in the hands of students for that first day is exceedingly tough. So we will try this year to find ways where we can maybe buy the 5th grade's Chromebooks, because I think those are really important to get into the hands of them day one, maybe ahead of time. I also want to be honest and say that there are some issues with buying Chromebooks this summer that are going to affect all school districts. So Intel has notified everyone that there is going to be a shortage of, and this is where we're kind of going to get into the weeds, and I apologize, there's going to be a shortage of the processors that they use in the Chromebooks. So what does that mean? Well, basically most of our vendors have said if you don't place that order in May or June, you are probably not going to get it. Even beyond buying through BOCES, you are not going to get that equipment until September or October. There is some talk, there are some vendors, some manufacturers that are trying to come up with Chromebooks with different chips that maybe could be ready in time. We're not really sure, kind of playing it by ear. So we'll know more as we get closer to May, but we may need to try to think about other ways we can do it, maybe using some textbook money from this year or some way to possibly get those 5th grade Chromebooks ordered before the end of the school year. So I think I will open it up maybe to the board for questions now, just for this part, and then we'll talk, we're going to talk about network hardware after that, and then about smart schools. So we'll kind of give a couple little breaks in between. So,
thank you, Julie, that's nice. I'll start, if you don't mind. Didn't we just replace our telephone system?
We did. We replaced our telephone system and we bought 500 phones. So those 500 phones are mostly in offices. They're generally not in classrooms unless they're special ed classrooms. So that did not cover every room in the buildings.
But you mentioned we have to replace all of the phones district-wide.
No, just we need to just in every classroom. I'm sorry, I was not clear.
I misunderstood.
So basically, I can give you the long story of it. We're buying a new fire alarm system, and the new code requires the new fire alarm system to not just have like a strobe and a siren that goes off, but to actually have verbal commands like lockdown, lockdown, lockdown. So there actually have to be announcements. And it made sense for them, it seems, since our PA systems in a lot of the buildings, if you remember your childhood PA system and the one from Greece where they had like the little dip switches that they toggle to talk, that is still most schools, the PA system. So rightfully so, they decided that it would make sense if we're putting speakers out into the rooms now for these fire alarms, we should combine it with the PA system. So that is a fantastic thing, and our new PA system will be going in, and I think part of that is now delayed. They said until the following summer, which is why we can delay some of these phones. But unfortunately, the new systems don't let you talk back to them. So if you've ever been into one of our elementary schools, you might hear, you know, Mrs. Smith, I need Johnny down at the office, and Mrs. Smith can literally yell back up at the ceiling, okay, I'll send him right down. Well, in the new system, there is no way to do that. So they do need in the classrooms a way to communicate back to that office, and if there were an emergency, to be able to communicate from that classroom. So we are going to put phones in each room, but they're not like the fancy office phones that you have over there. It's a much more stripped down model. The cost of the phone itself is a lot cheaper, but unfortunately the cost of the software license is the same exact cost as if it's the fancy one. So that's kind of where that big cost of the phones comes in. That was a very long-winded explanation of that, but
What do we do with the equipment that we're replacing? Do we try to, I mean, I know probably a lot of it we cannot, you know, like those televisions you talked about.
most of the equipment, by the time we are done with it, it is really not useful for anyone. We've tried to sell it very unsuccessfully. If Steve, I think Steve was here somewhere. Yep, Steve is here. He can back me up on this. By the time we're done with it, we actually try and reuse a lot of our equipment. So for instance, the CAD machines that are 4 years old that aren't going to be used in CAD anymore, we will actually repurpose those. We might have to put a different hard drive in them. We might have to do something to them, but we'll use them in offices, or we'll use them in spaces where, in a special ed classroom where they needed some extra computers. We generally will find new homes for them and for the next year or two, and then roll them out. The Chromebooks would be a perfect example, those ones that were 4 years old. We did have a little aha moment. So last year at the junior high, I'll say, when we bought enough equipment to have loaners and carts for the junior high students in case they forgot theirs, and we put these brand new, just like the ones that they had in their possession to take home, in these carts. And what we found was, if you're a junior high student, you're like, oh, I forgot it. I could have this great one that I can borrow here from the carts. We had a lot of kids that were, you know, kind of conveniently forgetting theirs and just using them from the carts. So this year we kind of wised up. And those Chromebooks that were really on their last leg, specifically some that the high school students might or might not have pulled the rubber borders off the outside, plucked off some keys, the ones that were like our worst Chromebooks, they became the loaners, specifically at the high school. Because I did not want to encourage kids to forget theirs. And this way, if you forget yours, you're the dregs of the barrel. Like they're the Chromebook. It's kind of the Chromebook of shame. Like you don't want to show up in class with the Chromebook that somebody, you know, kind of physically destroyed. So we do find homes for all of them until literally there's really no life left in it. And then for the most part, they got recycled.
Okay, thank you. Sandra?
I made some notes as you were talking about the replacements, replacements on page 8, and I got confused. 138 MacBook replaced by PC laptops, and 106 PC laptop replacements plus computers. So I'm wondering what the difference is. I wrote down that they're for teachers in both cases.
They are for teachers. It's some teachers have PCs already and some teachers have MacBooks already. So we used to actually replace MacBooks with MacBooks, but we're not anymore. So those MacBooks that would cost me $1,500 to replace, I mean, I really could have just said teacher replacements, But we are kind of distinguishing because we have teachers that currently have a MacBook that will be receiving a much cheaper PC. The other thing that I want to note.
Basically, it's 244 new pieces of
Replacements.
equipment for teachers.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
And I am hopeful right now. We have been getting a really incredible deal. I don't know if any of our people have theirs here on the HP tab. Oh, yeah, yes, thank you. Hold this up. So this is what we've been buying teachers, which is really, we've been getting a fantastic deal on it. This year we've been buying these for $789. If you went to the store and tried to buy the same machine, because I tried to, for home, it was about $1,250 to $1,400. So an incredible deal on these. I don't think we are going to get the same deal next year. We may have an opportunity a little later to buy some more at this price, but next year they're saying it's going to be in the probably $900 range for the same price. It has to do with their state contract, and they bid for the state contract on a model that's much thicker and kind of clunkier and not as nice as this one. I will show, actually I'm going to show one more thing on this because I think it's really been, this is where we get kind of techy and dirty. The really nice thing about this is that it's a tablet and you can write on it, and when we have new devices like this board or an HDMI projector, we can actually just plug in a wireless adapter, and as a teacher I can walk around my classroom and I can be drawing, and that will be going up on the board. And what's also really nice is it's kind of a new mindset. Instead of having the student walk up to the board to write, now instead I may just hand the student the tablet and they write it right there at their seat. So a lot of different opportunities now available, kind of untethering us from the board.
Show us
Thank
what
you
you
for the
have
prop.
on there, Julie.
It's password protected.
No, don't.
More questions?
So you had said that the fifth graders, Chromebooks are going up to sixth grade with them. They come back over the summer and then they get redistributed in the fall, or?
That is what we did last summer. It is not written in stone. I think I will leave that up to Joe and others to decide whether we're going to do that. It will definitely be a much more momentous task to do that when you have 3,700 of them out there versus just the 900 we had in 7th and 8th grade. There have been interesting reports from other districts that have kind of gone before us. Some of them have said, I mean, the one thing that you worry about is you worry about loss over the summer, students who aren't coming back. What was interesting from some of the other districts, they said actually the kids tended to take better care of them over the summer than during the year because they weren't transporting them. So they weren't stuffing them in a backpack and bringing them back and forth to school. So they had far fewer losses in just repairs and damage, but they did see a little bit of an increase in kids who just didn't come back. Now the good thing is if you're a student and you happen to walk away with your Chromebook, we can make it so you can't ever use it again. We can't force you to bring it back. We can certainly try. We can call your future school. We can do lots of things, but technically it's difficult, you know, to go and pry it from your hand and things like that. But we can make it so they can't use it, so it has a message as soon as you open it up that says this is property of the North Colony School District, please return, all those things. We have GPS tracking, we can see exactly where it is. But short of having a police officer go to their house, so those are all kind of considerations. And the other thing is that to note, you know, when you bring back in 3,700 Chromebooks, when they're in their boxes, they're super easy to store because you can stack them all up. When you have a Chromebook and its power supply sitting there, you can't really. In fact, it gets really hard, and they're heavy. So if you try and put them in like tubs, they crack the tubs. So in fact, last year we came up with that kind of a very creative way to do it. We bought these carts and we actually stacked them with pieces of paper that noted everybody in alphabetical order for the class. And every 5 Chromebooks was a list of the Chromebooks in that order. So we could easily get to them, we could easily find them, and when it came to be the day to distribute 7th grade, then we laid out all the stacks of 5 on tables and we could easily hand them back out. So we do have methods, but it does take up a large amount of space to store them over the summer, and that's something that is in short supply.
And how many have not come back?
To date, oh man, you'll have to help me, because at one point we were only at 1. I think we've had a few more, maybe 3? I think 3 total, which over a year and a half, I think is a pretty good record. So they've generally been students who've been out for some sort of odd, spotty, like maybe a medical reason or something happened and they were kind of in and out, and then all of a sudden they were gone. So it was kind of an extended. The ones that are, you know, immediately leaving, it's been very easy to get them.
So the MacBooks, is there a software component with that also? Because
there is.
obviously MacBooks and PCs are not compatible.
So
for the most part.
Okay, so there's 2 parts. I'm not sure which of those parts you're getting to in the question, but so from a software perspective, a lot of our software actually is available on both. So for the MacBooks for the art, for instance, the art software, we just buy a license to Adobe Creative Suite, and that works on a Mac or a PC. It doesn't matter which one. And in the old days, you would have bought a specific one for Mac. In these days, you're just buying a seat for a person to use, so they don't care which platform we use. There are some advantages to getting rid of the Macs for us, though, because we do have to buy a piece of software that helps us manage them. And the management software is extremely expensive for the Macs, and it is based on the number of Macs we own, so that as we get rid of the Macs, where normally we would kind of say, oh, you know, keep your old Mac until it's totally dead. In the case with the Mac, since we're actually paying for the license to management, we actually are pulling those back and trying to get rid of them as soon as possible, just so we won't have to continue to pay that expensive management fee on them.
And I was thinking about the ones for the teachers, sorry. I should
For the
clarify
teachers.
that. So, yeah, I don't know if they have certain programs, maybe that.
Really, all of the software they use, there's some software that goes with our smart boards, and again, that is now not specific to an OS. You can use, they have a version for the PC and a version for the Mac, so really everything that we have works on either, which is why it made the transition fairly easy. The only thing that is slightly different is some of the Mac specific stuff, like the old iMovie and iDVD and iPhoto. There are equivalents, but they're not the same name. You know what I mean? It's not exactly the same software package, so there is some migration and conversion that has to happen. So, like, if you were a Macintosh user and you had all of your photos from, you know, years in that iPhoto software, we do have to port them over and put them into a different thing on the PC side that kind of organizes your photographs for you. So different. On the video side, we actually have a subscription service called Video that both the students and teachers get to use and can collaborate on from any device. So that's kind of negated the need for the old iMovie. And it works better because now if you have students in different houses working on a project together, they don't even have to come together. They can come together and collaborate from their houses. So if you have 5th graders where they don't have a car, they can't, you know, drive to meet each other, they can still upload videos and be editing together and working together all on their Chromebooks.
Julie, I have one more question about the iPads for the music department. What do they do that they're so expensive? What is it? Can you tell us about that?
I wish Deb were here to explain the curricular piece of it's actually an app that's specific for the music department that allows them to, they have specific kind of activities and games and curricular things that teach them the notes. And the other really nice thing about the iPads in the music class is this kind of goes to that equitable piece. We have a lot of students who either physically or developmentally can't play an instrument like the recorder. You know, we teach all kids a recorder. There's several instruments, but they can play on the iPad. So she can set up an instrument like a keyboard or something that will mimic the sound, and they can participate just like everybody else, even if they couldn't physically hold a recorder in their hand. So the iPads have several uses. So they use them as instruments. They use them with a couple apps like that. They also use them with this program called Quaver that teaches them about the notes and the construction of music. And
Composition software.
yes, and it is age
Yeah.
appropriate, so the little kids are moving, it's cute, there's like a farmyard thing with lambs and cows, and they're moving around and making the sounds and creating music out of it, so it's really nice.
Is it the device or an app for the device?
It's both.
It's both.
So they
So-
have an iPad, and then there's the Quaver app, which is downloaded on it.
So that app cannot be used on, like, say, Chromebook.
It can be used on Chromebook, but our issue has been that not every student, if you think of those K through 2 students, not all those students will have a one-to-one Chromebook. So when they go to the music room, now they don't have a device.
Okay, well, there's gonna be 30 in each
So
elementary
now they
school.
will have a device, but prior to that, they wouldn't. Right now they have 15. They have enough so that
Okay.
the kids
I
can
see.
share
Yes,
one,
got
but they
it.
don't have enough so that every kid
Will
could
have their
do
own.
the app on their own in the class. If you want more specific information on the app, I can get more from Deb so she can show you what it looks like.
Thank you. You talked about the 5th graders taking their Chromebooks to 6th grade. What about the seniors' Chromebooks? Where are they going, or are those the crapola ones that are going out the door?
So the seniors Chromebooks, the seniors and the juniors this year do not have new Chromebooks. They are existing ones that
Oh, I know that.
that we put together.
I have a senior.
So what we have planned is I am hoping that we can use the seniors Chromebooks to fill our loaner carts, because the ones that are currently in our loaner carts right now are end of life at June, so they're literally a paperweight at the end of June. Their coach turns back into a pumpkin, and we can't use them anymore. So the hope is that we will use those back in those carts as loaners. And we are crossing our fingers that the 11th grade can make it through one more year of theirs.
Other questions, Sam?
You mentioned repair a lot of times. Do you have a parts budget, or does that come from cannibalizing other machines?
It comes from both. So we do actually have a parts budget, and we do all of our repairs in-house. In fact, we are hoping next year to actually start a student help desk at the junior high. And unlike before, we had some efforts before to kind of start up a help desk, but there wasn't a whole lot we could have students do, because most of the stuff on a PC required them to know usernames and passwords and things that we really couldn't give out to students. But now with the Chromebooks, there's actually an opportunity to give students a chance to actually repair them. And the parts are fairly inexpensive. They're like $30. I mean, we literally, when we charge people for parts, we're charging them for just the actual part, and they range from like $30 to $40. And they're repairs that we can teach kids to do. So the hope is to do that. We do have some oopsies. We do have some that have water spills or other things. If for instance the motherboard is shot, it's not cost effective to replace the part. So where it's cost effective, we replace the part. Where it's not, and we have to replace the whole computer, we replace the whole computer.
What does that end up being, like ballpark figure?
For
Aggregate parts.
our parts budget this year, and that's really a hard one to say because we actually had to move some money into it. Some of it came from supplies. I think the original budget, I'm gonna misspeak. I think it was around $8,000.
Is the most expensive thing a screen? I think they're like $30, $35.
It is.
And then there's probably at least like 10 broken Chromebooks a week or so. I mean, they'll find that one better.
So some of it's been bought through supplies. Some of it we've had replacements. Some of it has been under warranty. The other thing that you're gonna notice is as the Chromebooks age, most of them have a 1 or 2 year warranty, and we're about to hit that expiration point on a lot of ours. So I have a feeling we had a lot of battery issues with the Dells. In fact, we're actually looking at possibly buying a different model for next year because we had so many issues with batteries. And I think that when those start failing, we could have a lot of replacements.
Speaking of replacements, when there is damage to the Chromebooks at the junior high level, where does the insurance come into play that the children have the option of purchasing at the end of the year?
Yep. So that insurance money that comes in actually comes into the general fund. It doesn't really come from my budget. So when you see me putting replacement dollars in my budget, it's because even though we as a district collect that money back. It doesn't go in directly into my budget. So we do collect $20 from parents if they're willing to buy the insurance. If they aren't willing to buy the insurance and they have an oopsie, we'll charge them the actual price of the parts. We don't charge them anything for labor, but whatever it costs us, if it's a screen and it's $30, we charge them that $30. There are a few parts that are $50, or if you accidentally lose the machine or drop it, or there's multiple issues. Unfortunately, if your water bottle opens up in your backpack, it tends to do a lot of damage. So in those cases, the insurance is really helpful. And those are the cases where from my budget, we're actually having to shell out to buy a new Chromebook. But we do a ton of repairs.
If you did end up with the one-to-one Chromebooks, letting students keep them over the summer, what is that going to do to the network traffic? I mean, we haven't talked about the network traffic yet, but all of that stuff gets routed through the district's network.
So I don't think over the summer, because we don't have kids here, so how can I word this? We pay the same monthly regardless of whether the students are here in our building or not here in our building. So we're going to pay the same price to First Light whether they're physically here or outside, and they have them at home already right now. So I think that the network traffic is not going to be so much of an issue because it's really the same as it is now. It's just they're going to be sitting in their house doing it versus here. It may be at times of, I don't know, that's really hard to say whether it would be more or less. We do, it's part of what I'm going to cover in the next bank of slides, but I will say that we did budget to increase our bandwidth. We'll dive a little bit down because you're asking kind of a technical question. We have a contract right now for 1.5 gig. We're at about 1.25-ish right now. I think with the new Chromebooks that we're going to add, we're going to go over that 1.5. So it's actually not, believe it or not, part of my budget. It's actually part of the utilities budget. But I did add in an amount, which is about $9,000, to increase us to 2. And if you're really technical, with burst speeds up to 3 in case we're doing state testing and need to, just for a day, increase up to 3, it will cover us. And I think if we do that increase at some point next year, in the beginning probably of next year, we probably won't have another increase for the next 2 or 3 years. I think that will cover us for quite a while.
I have a question on the phones that are going to be put in the classroom. So you said that the phones will be replacement because the teachers you won't be able to hear them respond from the classroom when, like, you call down the office to say such and such is ready for you. Is there a concern from a safety perspective? I don't know how often that is used, for them to communicate back and forth in the classroom.
I think there's both a concern about safety and needing to be able to communicate. Think about the case, God forbid, there's an active shooter in the building, and being able to actually communicate with the people in the classroom. And I think there's also a privacy concern. If you think about, back in the day when we were all in school and somebody would come over the announcement and say, "Send Johnny down to the office," and the whole class would go, "Ooh." This kind of gives a little more privacy. So now somebody can call and say, "Well, can you send after?" And so I think there's multiple advantages into having those in the classroom. I think most of all it is for security, though. We are going to talk, I promise, later about some creative ways that we might be able to fund those phones. So don't panic yet.
No, I think it's a great idea. I'm more thinking of the opposite, as far as now they're comfortable with being able to talk back to the office. Is there a concern that now they won't have that real-time communication with the office for some reason? I'm just thinking out loud.
They still will. The office can still both out the fire alarm speaker and out the phone itself. There's a software product called Informacast, so we actually can broadcast out a subset of the phones. We have a lot more control actually with the phones than we do with the fire alarm system, because we can create some custom small groups where if you just wanted to send a broadcast message to first grade, it would just send it out their phones, and at any time they could pick up and respond them back to the office. So if you're in your classroom and they do want to go over the announcement over the PA and say, "Mrs. Smith, Johnny needs to come down to the office," she can still go over right away to that phone, and there'll be one button to call the main office and she can be talking to them.
Are you concerned that they won't be able to get to the phone to pick it up to do that?
Yeah, I mean, there's just, right now,
Yeah.
they've just got that such freedom just to speak out and, you know, God forbid there be something, but obviously there's, you guys have thought of, you know, there's clearly gonna be a way, it's just a matter of,
Getting to the
Yeah.
physical, getting to the phone, but if you're across the room and you can't get to the phone, what options do we have for that?
I think,
To press a button now.
Mhm.
If
okay, yeah,
I had
there you
an
go.
emergency in the
Right.
classroom, I'd have
It's
to go to the
still-
wall and press a button in order to
Punch
reach
that
the
thing,
office.
Okay.
So it wouldn't, I mean, I could walk over to the phone and do the same thing.
I think as many opportunities as we can give them. I think a lot of people are gonna have their cell phone with them too, and as many opportunities as you can give them to communicate, the better.
Two questions on phones. The licensing and maintenance, you said that's kind of the big cost there. Is that a recurring cost that we have to pay every year?
It is unfortunately.
So even though we purchased
So-
the phones, we're gonna see
Yeah.
this year in, year out.
And you're gonna see that a lot with manufacturers now. I mean, that's just the growing trend in the IT world, unfortunately. Now, I will tell you, we don't pay like a hardware warranty kind of maintenance on the phones anymore because the replacement cost is not that great. But we do pay the license fee and the license maintenance, which keeps our software up to date. So those two things we'll need to purchase. Just to kind of put that in perspective, when the original phone system was bought, I think the current maintenance on our current 500 phones with the licensing is about $35,000 a year. So it's not trivial.
And what happens if the power goes out? Like, I guess it's no worse than what we've got now with the PA system, is it?
Correct. Well, all of our closets actually have battery backups in them. And you'll notice that the phones actually aren't powered from power on the wall. They're actually over the Ethernet. So all of our phones should, in theory, stay up. Most of our network closets at current have, Keith, I'm gonna go to you for how much time you would say an average closet has right now.
Our target was an hour.
Yeah.
And then 3 of the elementary schools are on generator power, 3 more on the way. Then middle school will be, every data closet in the middle school will be on generator power.
Yeah.
And then the high school, I think it's 3 out of 13 data closets have generator power. The 2 big ones, and then another one.
So little by little, we'll be building all those closets into redundant, a second redundant power, but at a minimum, we've got at least an hour.
Also, garage, you have 10 hours of battery backup.
Yeah, so. More questions?
Thank you, Karen. Julie, if you want to go on.
Okay, I'm hoping everybody's awake now. Get ready to go. I promise I'll try.
That's why
We're already at
gonna
8,
move
so I'm gonna
on.
try and speed through some of this. I may not dive quite so deep into the network hardware, but again, if you have questions, feel free to holler. So I'm gonna get back to that. Okay, so fairly quickly, our network goals. Obviously, we are adding more devices to our network. We have a big construction project. So we do need to increase our Wi-Fi coverage and capacity to handle the new rooms at the junior high, Southgate, and Bell Hills. We need to replace some old access points. Our original access points were bought in 2012 and 2013, and they are due to be replaced. They've kind of gone end of life, so you'll see those. And we also now, since we're kind of bursting at the seams with kids, we have a lot of spaces that didn't have kids before that now have a lot of kids in them. So we've had to kind of put more access points just in places where we weren't sure that there were going to be that many kids before. And a few of the spaces like this, where it's a large room where we may have underestimated the volume and number of kids that were going to be there, we've had to put maybe 2 access points in there to cover for capacity. Other thing, we have some infrastructure costs, mostly at the core of our network, a couple switches. You're going to see also to cover for those phones, which we just talked about how they get their power from the switches in the closet. We're also talking at some point about getting security cameras, so we're trying to build in the extra switches in those closets to be able to power those devices. So you're going to see there's a line item for that. And the last thing I want to talk about is E-rate. This is the last year of E-rate funding in this cycle. We are really hoping and praying, so if everybody do a little prayer that next year they'll start a new cycle, but there's no guarantee of that. The program may die, we have no idea, but we're really hopeful that it will continue. Right now, it basically gives us a 40% refund on the eligible items we buy under it. The funds are allocated by enrollment in each of our schools, and you have to specifically house that equipment in the school at least for 3 years. So what we're trying to do now, we do have some E-rate funding left at some of our schools, and if you look at the detail lines of our network budget, you may notice that some of the schools look like they're getting more than everybody else, and that's really only so we can use up that E-rate funding. On the back end of that, if there's a school that you see that's getting a lot, we will be taking some existing equipment from there and actually reshuffling it to another location to even out everything. So I'm gonna move on to what we're purchasing. So again, I'm gonna try not to go way down into the details of this. You'll see the first couple items are some switch replacements. This next item is 24 of those power over Ethernet switches that are going in the closets to cover the phones and potentially some new security cameras that we're getting. There are a bunch of fiber optic modules, which is how we connect stuff to those switches. And we were talking about the battery backups. We have a couple of new closets. So you're going to see there's 3 battery backups, and one of them needs extended power, so it's getting an extra battery to add on to it to make it last longer. Down here, we've got some access points. 200 of them are the ones that are being replaced from 2012, that were purchased in 2012 and 2013. Then we've got another 100. This is access points for the junior high for any space that's coming online within the 1920 school year. So we've got some spaces at Bout Hills and Southgate as well as some just extra spaces where we needed more coverage. Because we're actually recycling some of the licenses, we don't need to buy new licenses for all of them, but we do need 50 more licenses for those access points. There's some money set aside for Wi-Fi authentication. We've got a couple new network closets coming online, and in order to bring a new closet online, you actually have to have fiber connecting it to one of our existing closets, so there's money in there for that. I will have Keith, if anybody's interested in the nitty-gritty details of the new handheld network testing equipment that we need, but there is a new one of those. And actually, I'm going to talk about this next one because, mostly because it's kind of funny and it'll lighten the evening a little bit. We are buying some new protective boxes for our gyms for the access points. If anybody has been to an elementary or middle school or high school gym and you put anything up on the wall, it immediately becomes a target for every kickball, baseball, any kind of player. The current ones we have kind of have this metal cage around them, which was very, very effective at keeping them from being hit by balls and things. However, it did sort of slightly interfere with the Wi-Fi signal. So we are replacing those with a much better, specifically designed for this purpose, containment protective box, so you'll see that. The last line, we always include a little bit as a replacement cycle for our servers, so there are 2 of those for $8,000. We've got a couple little tiny categories, and then I'm going to open it back up for the questions on network. This one is our non-public hardware. You'll see this as a line item in my budget. There's not much I can do about this. It is literally hardware that technically we loan, but really we just give to the non-public schools that are located in our area. The amount we give them is based on a state calculation. It's based on enrollment, and it's enrollment from the previous year. And it's been pretty consistently between $13,000 and $14,000 for the last couple of years. And the last one is IT equipment. This category is a little tricky. This is equipment technically that is not aidable. What does that mean? That means a good example is pretty much anything in this building. Because this is not a school building, doesn't have classes in it, most of the equipment here we can't get aid on. So for instance, this board, or Scott Hoot's lovely new laptop, or my laptop, or the administration staff at any of our other buildings, none of that is aidable, and we usually buy the replacements for it out of here. That being said, we do occasionally and sometimes frequently also use this for instructional equipment. When we need to, we can break into it to buy stuff for teachers and for classrooms. We just don't get aid back on it, but if you're worried about that, don't be worried, because we already spend over the limit that we need to spend to get our aid, so that's not been an issue in years past. And this amount is just a tiny bit more, I believe. I would have to look it up, but I think last year was $76,500, I think. So pretty similar. I'm gonna stop here just for a minute, just in case anybody has networking kind of questions, and then we'll talk about the smart schools. So I will open it up. Any questions about networking stuff?
Any board members with questions? Sam? Just shut up. Does any of our family, yes, Sam?
So the staff that you have, as far as the networking hardware, you guys install your own equipment and manage the equipment as well, so from a networking perspective and Cisco perspective, you have staff that's skilled in that area?
We do.
Okay.
We do. Much like, I will say, much like the maintenance department has a lot of people that are specific to the tasks, we do much of what some of the other districts would hire in people to do in-house. And honestly, from a network cabling perspective, that has been incredible for us, because if you're at a district where they have to hire out to have somebody come in, not only is it super expensive to have somebody else run the cabling for you, but it also takes time. There's a lag. Right now, and you know, I hate to say this, but when we have kind of an emergency and something needs to be moved and things need to happen, we have an incredible maintenance department, and they do their best to, you know, come and help and rescue. And a combination, they'll actually physically pull the cable, and my guys will terminate the ends on it, and we're good to go. So it's been really fantastic. And
generally, I think a network run is like average is probably like $500, but if you do it in house, it's I think just over like $130 for like a spool of 1,000-foot cable. So depending on how far the run is, it's just the material cost versus.
We built out a location out in Rochester, about 200,000 square feet, and we had to pay millers to do it all for us. So it was an exorbitant amount of money. So it's certainly, it's not a lot. I mean, it is a big space, but it certainly saves you money when you get folks on staff and time when you can do it on your own.
Any other questions?
Okay, I will move on to smart schools. I am not going to do a full-on smart schools presentation, because I'm pretty sure if we decide to use some of this money, in a couple of weeks we'll have a whole public forum and you'll hear me do the whole spiel again. And it's a long evening, so I'm going to try and make this a little short. We started off with $1.8 million, and we have spent it on some previous projects. We have about $541,000 left. In truth, we've got a little bit more than that, because it took so long for them to approve our one plan that we actually ran into another school year, and I was able to apply for some E-rate we didn't think we were going to be able to do. And so we got a little extra money back. So we can potentially, if we decide we're not going to use that for networking, we can actually apply for an amendment and get that money back towards whatever we decide to purchase. But at the moment, we've got about $541,000. So I just want to remind people of the categories we can spend that money in, just so kind of everybody has an idea. And I kind of would like to get people's feedback about what we're thinking we might do. So the first category is one we've already spent in. It's classroom learning technology, which simply means end user devices. PCs, Chromebooks, boards like this one, projectors, all those sort of technology devices. The next category is school connectivity. That is an odd way of saying network infrastructure in our building. So Wi-Fi, wiring, cable runs, all those sort of things fall under that. The next one, community connectivity, is a little odd.
Formerly did not have to be shared with the non-public school.
Yes, so I was going to come back to that, but I'll start it now. So two things to note about these two top categories. When we make a purchase in smart schools in those categories, we actually have to share a portion of that money with our non-public schools. And I'm going to get a little specific on this. So if we have a non-public school in our area, even if all of their kids came from Shen, but they physically were in our area, we would have to give them a proportionate amount to all of those students in their school. Even if they weren't our students, we still have to. And when we did this the first time, it was close to 20% of that money went to our non-public schools. So it is a significant percentage. So the other thing to note is when we first put in our initial plan and we bought all that network money, we kind of lucked out, because at that point, that was not a rule. That was not a category that was fundable. So we actually didn't have to share, and in fact, the state came back and said they would cover that sharing portion, because after the fact, they added this new rule. So we did well with that and ended up, and the public schools also did well because they now get this extra, the non-pubs actually get this extra piece. The other 4 categories, which are categories where you do not have to share, because in some of them, well, you'll see why. The community connectivity is actually trying to bring Wi-Fi out to the community. I only know of one other district that thought about doing it. That was Albany City. They were going to have some centers in the city where they offered Wi-Fi through their existing network. You can do pre-kindergarten classroom. The 5th one is a little bit confusing because it says transportable classrooms, but actually what that means is if you had transportable, like a trailer out in your parking lot, and you wanted to build a classroom to take those kids out of the trailer, you could use funds to do that. And the last one, which is one where I think we might actually be able to use some funds, is high-tech security. So I just want to kind of show people what now is in high-tech security. So you're going to notice the first thing is surveillance cameras, something that we sorely need in many of our buildings. It also includes the DVRs and video storage, kind of the back end of a surveillance system. And this third one, I don't think was there originally at all, is the VoIP telephones. So conceivably, we could use some money for the telephones. And that, when we're talking about replacing them in all the buildings, could be very useful. I also want to remind people that when we're putting a new security system in the junior high, and we're really putting that new security system in all of the new spaces, but the existing spaces that we have will still have our old security system, our old cameras, our old door swipes. So if we want to have one consistent security system eventually in our buildings, which I think we really do, we will need to find the money to fund that, and I think it's going to be hard. It's going to be a big number, and I think that's going to be hard to fund from the budget, so this might be a really good place to fund this from. I think it's a little bit scary to us right now that we have some buildings that are going to be coming online, and as the new spaces come online, they'll all be on the new security and the new cameras. But if you're trying to maintain that building, if you're the SRO and you're looking at that building, and something is happening, you're going to have to look at one system for those rooms and a completely different system for the other rooms in the building, and that's not a good plan. So we're hoping that maybe we could start to use that money for either a combination or one or two of those things. I do now, because I think people in their heads are now thinking back to that slide that I showed you earlier where we were buying phones, and I want to kind of put people in the correct mindset of Smart Schools Bond-X. So those of you who weren't here for the other presentations on it, there are some challenges to using Smart Schools. On average, it takes about 8 to 9 months to get approval on a good day. I will tell you, our second plan was a supplemental. It was technically expedited. I'm going to use some air quotes there, because by expedited we mean we put in the plan in June and it got approved in February. So it's also way tougher if you put your plan in June and July, because that's when a lot of school districts do it. So if you put it in January, you'll probably have a shorter window. If you put it in June and July, it's going to be a long window. And the other really, really important thing is, unlike E-rate, where E-rate, if we want to spend the money ahead, even though we haven't been approved yet for E-rate, we can buy that network equipment, and 6 months from now, they'll eventually give us our refund back. Smart Schools, you cannot spend a single penny until you have that approval. So for the construction project, unfortunately, for those phones that have to go in this year, I don't think we can use Smart Schools money. It won't be here in time. There's no way for the D-Wing rooms to get it approved and be able to buy them before those rooms have to come online. So it's a great use for probably maybe the other portion of the phones, but the stuff that we has a construction deadline and a date, that would be a risky move. That would keep me up at night. So I think we have to be careful about kind of where we target based on time and based on what we think we can get in on. And I think at this point, I think that's it, and I want to open it up because I'm assuming there'll be some questions on Smart Schools.
So 20% goes to non-public schools. Mm-hmm. That's not 20% to every school. That's just 20% total.
Total. So if we were using, let's make a really nice round number, 500,000, yeah, 100,000 of that, we'd only get 400,000. 100,000 of that would be split by enrollment between those other non-public schools. And they get to spend it however they want. Originally, when the documentation came out for smart schools, they said, oh, you're gonna share stuff with them. So everybody thought, oh, if I'm getting, 100 projectors, I'm gonna have to share 20 of them with these elementaries, and they're gonna check them out for me, and we're gonna have this process. But that's not really how it ended up. In reality, we just said, here's the money, tell us what you would like to buy. And some of them picked big things, and some of them drove me crazy by saying, yes, I would like this, and I'd like some cases and some $15 adapters, 20 of those. And I mean, it became like just crazy. But we kind of don't really have we thought we would have a say, but in the end, not so much.
So there's a formula that determines what amount is allocated to St. Ambrose or
Absolutely.
to...
And the formula, here's the other thing that I don't like about this. The formula is based on the enrollments that were recorded on Bed's Day of, I believe, the 2014-2015 school year. So we don't get any of the advantage of all these new students that we have enrolled. It's based on figures from back in 2014-2015, and that has not changed.
And the disadvantage of that is a double whammy. We don't get the advantage of our increased enrollment, and our private and parochial friends have gone through enrollment decline.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. So
it's misrepresented on both ends.
It is unfortunate, but that is what we're stuck with. There was an interesting thing though. Some of the schools, like St. Coleman's, actually have their own pocket of money. They're classified under a special thing. So originally we thought we were going to have to provide for them, and in the end we didn't. They were actually the most vocal at our public forum. They were the most vocal school, and it turned out I had then had to kind of sheepishly call them and tell them they weren't part of our fund.
Sorry, you're out.
Any questions for Julie before we wrap up?
Yeah, I do. So you mentioned ways to spend the Smart Schools Bond Act money, and you're looking at security, but community connectivity is one of those things. We started considering how, especially now when we're going to a one-to-one Chromebook, we have to assume some not insignificant percentage of students don't have internet at home. Is there a way we could use that money to make it more available in the community?
The way that other districts have used that has not been in the realm that I think you're thinking, like a mobile hotspot kind of thing.
I was thinking, my understanding, the way you explained it, it sounds like we would be able to go to, like, and I don't know, we don't have that much public space in North Colony, but if, like the Latham Kiwanis Park, and you put a hotspot there,
yes,
that wouldn't help my example, but...
And that is part of the problem, is there aren't a lot of places in a suburban school district that make sense to do that don't already have Wi-Fi. So, like, if you go to the mall, that seems like that would be a great place to do that, but there's already Wi-Fi there. If you go to Subway, there's already Wi-Fi there. If you go to the library, there's already Wi-Fi there. So there are places, in the city. I think that's why Albany City Schools, it made more sense, because there were places in the city just because of the congested kind of nature and how close quartered everything is there. It made more sense. They could actually do more. And I'm not sure that in the end they actually did. I know that they were pondering it in the beginning. I don't know if in the end that came to fruition. I know they were thinking about it, and they were pondering how much bandwidth they would actually require to do that.
Julie, we do something now, don't we, for children that might not have Wi-Fi, where they can actually access?
So we have most schools do, is a kind of locations around the area where they can go. We do not have mobile hotspots. Most of the districts that try that actually didn't have any takers. I do have a list that we're trying to work on of kids to get them access. The good news on the Chromebooks is that you don't have to have Wi-Fi access to use them. So if you're working on a Google document, for instance, it can cache it. You can actually do your work on the Chromebook. But obviously, if you're trying to surf something on the internet, that is an issue.
And the kids wouldn't be able to connect. Like you were saying, how the kids could from their homes, confer with each other. But if the child doesn't have Wi-Fi, then he would not have that capability.
That is correct.
So that isn't, you know, and I think the question you raised, Sam, and the question that you're alluding to, Mary, I think they're, you know, legitimate questions for us to begin to explore and to see, because, I mean, there is a fundamental inequity there for students who do not have access to Wi-Fi. And I mean, we look at our mission statement and the word contains the word all. And so if we're going to actuate that statement, then, you know, we do need to. And I'm in really bad problem identification and not solution point at this point in time. I mean, there are public places such as the library and the like, but that is a ongoing problem, and well appreciated. And you know, if there are ideas out there about what we could do, you know, I think we would be very happy to hear what they might be.
Absolutely.
So from a physical or from a security perspective, it sounds like the goal is at some point to get everybody in the school district on the same system. So do you have any idea of how long, you know, kind of, do you have a timeline that you're thinking? Because you're saying it's going to be difficult to maintain kind of two systems, so there's going to probably be some level of tolerance over a certain period of time, but do you have kind of like a plan in mind as far as timeline?
So part of the issue here is that the installation of the security system is kind of a joint effort between the construction project, my department, and also the maintenance department, because they're the ones setting some of the rules for the security and actually the door swipe. So there's a part that each of us will take on. The back end and the software piece is really my department. I think we're still kind of in the planning phases. In fact, we haven't even picked the security software that we're going to get. We've narrowed it down to 2 different ones. And so that's really not set in stone. Originally, I think things were planned to move a little quicker. And then within just the last couple weeks, the schedule has slightly changed. So I guess I will say, unfortunately, later in the week after our meeting on the 20th, I will know a lot more and could answer a lot more questions. But right now, I just don't have that information, so I would kind of just be speculating, and I hate to do that. I do know that to start with, the starting spaces, we're gonna get the back end of the software working and pilot it in those new spaces, and as quickly as we can fund it, or as makes sense, we will try and bring the rest of the buildings on. I think the plan is to bring the whole junior high on, but some of the other schools where they have a new pocket, the whole school won't come on right away. The cameras are going to be expensive. It's a big change. I think the doors will be less of an issue to get the whole building on the doors. I think the cameras is going to be a big ask.
And I think, you know, it's it's time for me to add my qualifiers here on that. And you know, Julie and I have been working on this budget together in terms of. And I think, you know, it is a dynamic process, and, you know, we are still looking at, you know, what can be funded as part of the building project. You know, are there any applications to Smart Schools Bond Act? Are there issues regarding replacement cycle and other equipment acquisition that, you know, perhaps that we can phase in over a longer period of time and the like. But I think you get the overall gist of where we're headed and, you know, what the priorities are as we go through this.
Julie, thank you so much. Appreciate all of your work on this and trying to find ways through all the strings they attach to the strings they give us, or it's supposed to. So thank you.
Well, it wasn't my quickest, but at least we're not here so much.
Well, Joe still
apologize. He was very good. It was very clear. It was very clear, and it was very good for us, even people like me who aren't technology wizards. Very clear, very good.
How many? I do have to ask, how many do we have in the end?
15.
All right, yeah, your numbers went up. That's good. Thank you.
I'd now like to talk about the acquisition of my latest piece of technology. It's called iMimeograph.
And I still have a flip phone.
Do we have an overhead projector we could use?
So, thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Good job, Julie.
Okay, and as you can see, the schedule for as we go forward here, April 1st, so next week is the monthly meeting for the Board of Education, but April 1st is an important night, and that's where staffing, anticipated building enrollment, new programs and initiative. On the 8th of April, we will have what the proposed budget will be, our latest on the property tax cap and property tax report card. Hopefully somewhere around, well, it's supposed to be delivered by April 1st. But, you know, as we get into April, we will have an idea, we hope, as to what our state aid package will be. Wednesday, the board will adopt on the 17th of April, at a monthly meeting, we'll adopt a proposed budget. We'll have our public forum and meet the board candidates night on the 8th of May. And we vote late this year on the 21st of May here at Goodrich from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. And that's our annual vote and Board of Education election. So Monday is an important meeting, and the 8th, of course, is important as well as we bring our budget to closure. So I want to thank you all for your participation this evening. Thank you very much, Julie. Thank you very much to our IT staff, and greatly appreciate everybody's attendance and participation in tonight's budget meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cora. I'll take a motion to exit the budget meeting. Mr. Bondell, and a second, Mr. Gaynor, and all in favor. Thank you very much.
Thank you.